I'm Josh, and I'm going to show you the process of building this Zimmerman's high tunnel. So this is a 34-foot wide high tunnel by 65 feet long. We have 6-foot sidewalls and 5-foot arch spacing. Also, this high tunnel has the W truss, 5 rows of purlins, and metal hip and baseboards. We also have a double layer roof with the inflation fan and 24-inch intake and exhaust fans that run off a thermostat to keep the high tunnel cool. On the far side, I have a wooden end wall with 2 4x8 swinging doors. And up on this end, we have a polycarbonate end wall with the metal framing and 2 4x8 sliding doors that meet in the middle. So previously I made some videos constructing a more basic high tunnel kit from Zimmerman's. There's lots of useful information in those too, but this series is covering more of the options that Zimmerman's offer. So let's get started building. So these are the sidewall posts. On this high tunnel that I'm putting up, it is 34 feet wide. So on the 34-foot wide high tunnels, we're going to put the posts in measuring up from the bottom at 44 inches. Now in most cases, all the other high tunnels, the narrower ones, like the 30-foot wide and smaller, they are going to be 32 inches is where you would pound the posts into. But like I said, this one is 34 wide. You pound it in an extra foot for more stability. And there are some circumstances where if you have really sandy soil or something, you may want to order the longer posts for the narrower high tunnels also, just so you get enough post in the ground to keep it where it belongs. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my 4 corner posts at 44 inches. So when I'm building high tunnels, I usually like to take my laser level and kind of check the site first before I put the corner posts in, just to see how the grade is. On this one, the far side is about 8 inches lower than this side up here. So I'd like to build my high tunnel level. So what I'm going to do is put this side 4 inches deep, and that side we're going to hold up a couple inches to level out the high tunnel. It's better to go in deeper, more so than holding up, but you can go a couple inches up on the back side to level things out. So I like to take my corner posts, they're marked at 44 inches, and for the ones that I'm going to put in a little bit deeper, I'll make a mark 4 inches extra so I can put them down to that. And the ones on the back that are going to be held up a little bit, I'm going to make a mark 4 inches low. So the way they're marked out now, when I pound them into those lines, they'll be pretty close, and then I'll take my laser level and finalize it. So if you're building a high tunnel on a slope, the high tunnel doesn't necessarily have to be level lengthwise, but you do want your end walls to be level across. And if you're in an area that has sandy, light soil or a lot of winds, you may want to cement your corner posts or even all the posts. Also, anchoring works well too. So my corner posts are most of the way in, so I'm going to take the laser level, check where we're at for a measurement here. So the posts are all averaging a little more than 30, so I'm going to go make a mark at 30 inches. We'll tap them all down just a little bit so that they're all at 30 inches with the laser level. Now if you don't have access to a laser level, Another affordable option is a line level or a mason's level. You can just put a string across your end wall posts here. These are only accurate if they're in the center, so you have to measure to make sure you're exactly between the two posts. This one would be at 17 feet because it's a 34 wide. And that'll tell you if you need to adjust anything to get them level across likewise. Now that everything is level, I'm going to go ahead and set up for putting in sidewall posts. Some growers like to use weed barrier or plastic mulch to prevent weeds from growing around the baseboard. Others like to be able to plant right up to the baseboard. But if you want to use the weed barrier, you would lay that out now and put the sidewall posts through it. So I have this sidewall laid out. From outside to outside it is 65 feet, and this hoop house has 5-foot arch spacing. So everything in between is centered on 5-foot increments. I like to make a pilot hole before I set the posts. It helps them go in easier and straighter. So I have my center post in now, and I'm ready to put up the string. I found out that it works pretty well to attach the string at the shoulder of the end wall posts, and that way as you're going along and pounding the rest in, you just pound them down so that the string lines up at the shoulder, and that works pretty well. It's not anywhere up where you're pounding or in the way. If you have a lot of rocks like I do, you may have to dig the hole and set the post after you remove the rocks that are in the way. Right about there. There are a lot of different options for pounding these posts in, but I found that you can be more precise doing it by hand. So now we're going to take a look at arch building. First, I will start with assembling a 30-foot arch. You want to make sure it's pretty level where you're putting these together. Otherwise, you might have a kink in your runner when you get it done. Also, that helps with sliding these pipes together. If you're up or down a little bit, they go together real hard. If they're perfectly straight with each other, they slide together easy. So we'll start with assembling the 24-foot bottom runner or brace of the W truss. We want to slide on 2 clamps, and those go on better if you go over the side that has the crimp down on it. And if you want them to move a little bit better, I usually tap them with a hammer just a little bit. And then they slide. So you're going to want to slide one to each side, and you want to make sure that the 2 flat ends are straight or flat with each other. So if you want to, we can put a board on each end. That can help see it a little bit better. But if you don't have these straight, you're going to have some trouble trying to make it fit on your arch. And then we're going to put 3 Tek screws in this joint, kind of spaced evenly around. So you want to keep these, you know, about 3/4 inch to 1.5 inches from the splice here. And that should complete this one. So for laying out your arch, you want to try to find a fairly level area. I like to put stakes in, one for the bottom, one for the side. They have some tension on them usually, so you want to keep them at the 30-foot width that we're going with here. So those ones are in. We're going to measure across here. So here's 30 foot, and I like to go 1 inch under 30 feet because they kind of spring out just a little bit when you pop them out of these posts, and then it'll be exactly 30 feet. So we'll start with putting one end in the post there, and then we're going to slide 2 clamps down that way, one up in the centerpiece. Put that together. Then we're going to take this one and do the same. 2 clamps down the big side and one up in the center. So as I'm assembling the arches, I like to check over the clamps. Every now and then you might find one that has something sharp. We don't want that up where your plastic is going to go. So I usually just take a file, and you can file these down. As long as they're smooth to your finger, you should be okay. And if these are all together tight, we can come over here and pop it into the posts. Sometimes you have to push on them just a little bit. You want to make sure that the ends are flat with each other. And if your ground isn't perfectly level, you can always use a few shims just to make sure that your arch is sitting flat. Otherwise you might have a bend in it as it goes over your high tunnel. So when I'm laying these trusses out, I usually like to put this 24-foot or bottom runner on first. And then we have a 4-foot brace and a 6-foot. So the 4-foot goes down the arch a little ways like that. These two connect on these small clamps. The 6-foot one goes up toward the center, or the peak of the arch. It's usually easiest to put this double joint together first and then do those single ones. And like here, if it's pretty hard to get underneath, I like to just scoop a little bit of dirt out underneath it. And then you can reach under a lot easier. So we want to make sure that the square shoulder on the bolt is locked into the square hole on the brace band so that it doesn't come loose in the future. Then we can attach this end. So once all these braces are temporarily in place, we'll go ahead and measure where they go for this first truss. On the first one, I measure where all these bands are going to go, and after that I will paint marks on the grass, and you just line the bands up with the marks for all the rest of them. You don't have to do any more measuring. So I'll start here with the measurements. This is the peak of the arch, or the center. So we're going to measure from this splice here, and we're going to come up 18 inches. That's where this brace band will go. And then we're going to measure down from that same splice 48 inches, or 4 feet, where this one will go. And then once again from the splice all the way down to this end, we are going to want this one at 129 inches. And then you do the same on the other side. So now we're ready to start tightening everything up. So before we tighten up this joint here on the arch, we want to make sure that they're nice and tight together. So we want to make sure these Tek screws are put in first. Make sure your arch is laying nice and flat. These screws you want to keep closer to the edge down here. You don't want them any further than an inch up to the center there. So there's going to be one here, one on the bottom underside, and then we'll turn the arch over and put one on the other side. We'll leave the top open so that there's nothing for your plastic to get snagged on. So now we're ready to tighten up our W-truss braces. I usually start with this bottom runner first. I tighten both ends of this, and you want to make sure that you don't want to tighten it with it crooked or offset. Try to have it nice and straight on the arch. You want to tighten the brace band enough so that it gets flat with the brace. So then we'll tighten the tops of the braces next, and then we'll finish with these bottom clamps where the two braces come together. So once everything is tight, we want to go along and put a Tek screw in all of the bands that we just tightened. We want to keep the Tek screws lower to make sure they're not anywhere up where your plastic is going to be. So everything is tightened up. Before I turn it over to put the screws on the other side, I'm going to paint on this first arch, paint the lines since we measured everything out. And we want to line up the rest of these braces and brace bands with these marks. That way all of your arches will be all the same. And a note is these bottom bands here we don't measure. You just measure the top ones along the top side of the arch, and these ones will center themselves. So when you're making your measurements on the first arch, those measurements are somewhat approximate. They should get you really close. The other way to check is to make sure this bottom runner is straight. So when you sight down this bottom runner, if it's bowed one way or another, you can adjust your braces a little bit to push it wherever it needs to go to be straight. And once you have the first one figured out, then you paint your marks and all the rest should be straight too. So now we turned our arch over and we're going to put in the last two screws on this arch splice. Also, now is a good time to check over all the heads of your bolts and make sure they're down and tight the way they should be. So there will be a total of 3 screws on each of these joints. And I found out that it's a lot easier to measure out and mark where the purlins are going to go while the arch is down here. So this will be the center purlin. Typically a 30-foot wide hoop house has 3 rows of purlins. If you have more than that, the measurements are going to be different. But I'll show how to do a high tunnel with 3 rows of purlins. So we want to find the center of this arch peak, and that is 29 3/4. And you can double check from each way if you'd like. Then down each side from this, measuring from this splice again, we are going to make a mark at 66 inches. So after you have your 3 marks made, I take one of the purlin clamps and I'm going to center it on the mark here, and you're going to mark where the 2 screws are going to go. Then I like to pre-drill those. This is a 9/64 drill bit. That is just a little bit smaller than what the Tek screw is going to drill. So the Tek screw will still drill its own hole. This will just make it go in a lot easier. It helps a lot with making the screws go in quickly when you're holding things up above your head on ladders. You want to make sure they're nice and straight with the arch. Usually there's a seam or something you can go off, because if your clamps are twisted a little bit, that makes them go on harder. And then, just because these sometimes tend to be a little bit sharp, I like to tape those so that nothing gets torn while I'm pulling my plastic over. People have asked if using duct tape will harm your plastic over time. I've been using duct tape for over 10 years, and I haven't seen any trouble from the multiple brands I've used. But then again, I haven't tried every brand that's out there. If you have a large number of these arches that need to be built, you can set the jig up on tables or sawhorses. You just have to make sure that they're rigid and stable so that your arches aren't changing sizes or anything as you're working. So this arch is finished. Now we just have to continue building the rest of them using the pattern we made. Just keep lining everything up with the paint marks and they should all turn out the same. So now we're going to take a look at assembling the 34-foot wide arches. So this is where these stakes need to go. So when we're making this measurement for the arches, we want to make sure we're measuring from outside to outside of the arch. So on the 34-foot wide high tunnel, you're using a lot of the same parts, just a few additions. So we're using the same 2 arch sides. We're just putting in a larger peak. So this is a 9-foot peak versus the 30-foot arch has a 5-foot peak. Also, we're using the 12-foot pieces on the bottom runner or brace, and we're adding this 3-foot piece in here. Otherwise, the braces for your V's and W's here, those are the same pieces, the 4 and 6 foot. So this will go here. Like that. Once again, you want to make sure the ends are flat. And then we can put 3 screws in each of these joints. So let's take a look at some measurements. So once again, we will start with our measurements up here toward the peak or the center. We'll take this one here. We're going to measure from this splice on the arch. This one is going to be centered on 31 inches. And then we'll come down from the splice for this brace, and this one will be at 36 inches. And then we'll come a little further to keep the tape along the arch. This one is going to be at 122 inches. And you can measure likewise on the other side. So once again, we can check. This is nice and straight, so those measurements are good. We can go along and tighten everything up and paint the marks, and we don't have to do any more measuring for the rest of the arches. So we have all the brace bands tightened and tech screw in each one. So now we turned it over once again, and we're going to put the 3rd tech screw in this splice or joint right here. So there's one underneath now, this one here, and we'll put one on this side. We don't want anything up on top. One of those on each side. And then we'll go ahead and measure our purlin spacing again. And on this 34-foot wide high tunnel, we are doing 5 rows of purlins. So the center of the 9-foot peak is 53 3/4. That is where your peak purlin is going to go. And for the next one down, we're going to measure from the splice down 18 inches. And 90 inches. And then we'll mark this side out. And then once again we'll take the clamp and make the spots where the holes are going to get drilled. Now that we're done with all the measuring, we can tape these joints, and this arch will be finished. So by setting up and using a pattern like this, you should be able to achieve a uniform, high-quality structure. And here's what we hope to avoid. The integrity of a structure like this is questionable, not to mention it's pretty unsightly. if you remember, we can put on the roof bracing clamps while you're assembling these arches. So on either end of the high tunnel, the second arch in is going to have 2 clamps or brace bands on each side between the bottom runner and the first 4-foot brace. Those are where your roof braces are going to connect. And you can put those on. It saves some time later. If not, you can always just spread the clamps a little bit, pop them on afterward, and you can do this on the ground or after you put them up. I like to squeeze the clamps down a little bit after you bend them to make sure that they're small enough to get the bolt in when you're putting your braces up. So there's only 2 arches that need these extra brace bands. Now before we set the arches, I like to put on the brace bands that are going to hold your corner brace here. So just the first 2 posts on each corner need one of those clamps. Also, if your high tunnel has knee braces, you can slide 2 clamps on for those likewise. That saves a lot of spreading and trying to get the clamps on later. You can do it before you set the arches. So on these end wall arches, there's no W truss in these because your end wall is going to come up here. And so what I do is I mark where the purlins are going to go once again. And on these ones, we're not going to pre-drill any holes. I'm just going to make some little centering marks. This is where your purlin goes when you bring a clamp up. It's supposed to be centered over that middle mark, so those side marks help you get that lined up. Also, whatever side is out where your plastic is going to be, I don't put a Tek screw out here on the outside. I would just put the 3 Tek screws on the inside of the high tunnel and underneath. So then we'll go ahead and tape these joints also. On these end wall arches, I just slide on the appropriate number of brace bands for your roof bracing, purlins, and end wall uprights. And then you can just slide them to wherever you need them as you're building. So now we're going to take a look at setting the arches. There's a lot of different options for doing this, and we'll look at some of those now. But usually it just comes down to what you have available and what will do it safely. Now we're ready to assemble the center or peak purlin that goes up in the top of the arch. On this high tunnel, I'm using a 1-foot purlin starter. So with the 1-foot purlin starter, we want to line up the splice where your 12-foot piece starts at 1 foot. And then once you attach this, which is on your arch, and you put the pieces together, it will equal 1 foot to the outside of the arch. So I have my 12-foot purlin pipes laid out and connected, long enough for my high tunnel. We're just going to put in the center run of purlins. We're going to wait with the other ones until after the arches are leveled and the roof braces are in. We want to make sure these joints are all the way together. This high tunnel has 5-foot arch spacing. So now I'm going to go along and mark the purlin every 5 feet. and that's where the purlin clamp or pipe strap will go. Now this high tunnel is 65 feet, so with the 1 foot purlin starter or end here in this case, I'm going to line this up at 64 feet, and that's where we'll cut this pipe off, and the finished product would be 65 feet from end to end. So now we're going to attach the clamps centered on the lines that we made every 5 feet. So we want to make sure that all these clamps are nice and level, straight with each other, and also in the same plane as the purlin end that you put on. Sometimes using a board or something underneath kind of helps keep them straight. If you have one twisted a little bit one way or another, it's going to make some trouble when you're putting them on up in the arch. Another thing to remember is that once this is put up, it's going to be flipped over. This is the top side and this is the bottom side. So we want to make sure all of our tech screws and things are facing up now, so that when we flip it to put it up into the arches, everything will be facing down away from your plastic or your film. So I usually connect every other purlin. So this is the first one, here's the second one. I'm going to put a screw in here, and then I'll have 2 pieces. That's usually enough to put up at a time. You don't want it much longer than that. I'll leave the screw out of the next one so that we can separate it. Just keep these pieces in order so that they are in order once you put them up. And the joints that I put together with the tech screw, I tape those right away down here before I put them up. The splices or joints that we're not putting together now, once they're up in the high tunnel and connected, we'll tape those up there. Now that we have the purlin clamps attached on the marks that we made, and the ends are finished, we can take sections of purlins and attach them in the peaks of the arches with the pre-drilled holes that we made. Once you get it attached all the way, all the arches will be spaced 5 feet apart, and from outside to outside, up at the peaks, it'll be 65 feet, just like at the bottom down here. So we're going to slide the appropriate clamp up to the marks that we made and center it on the middle one. And then we're going to temporarily attach the purlin to this clamp. And we'll leave this clamp loose for now so it can pivot while I attach the other end of the purlin. And then I'll come back later and tighten it once the purlin is up where it belongs. I like to install the peak purlin before I attach the arches to the sidewall posts. That way, as you're spacing everything appropriately, they can still move a little bit to get in the right position. You want to be sure to have eye protection when drilling these tech screws. So all we have to do is attach these purlin clamps in the pre-drilled holes in the arches. So it works best to tighten these tech screws gradually from side to side, instead of tightening one all the way and then the other one. We just want to make sure we're centered on the marks here, and then we can tighten this up. And we'll also want to put a tech screw through the band here. So now we will continue putting sections up until we get to the other end, making sure that we keep the sections in order. You want to make sure that you don't over-tighten these as you're fastening them. I've seen them strip out or the heads pop off from over-tightening before. Remember to keep the screw on the bottom side of the purlin. We want to make sure that we tape these splices too. Some of these joints can get kind of sharp on your rough plastic. In some cases, the place where the clamp needs to go is right on the splice, and we'll leave that clamp off until we're to this point, and then we'll put this on. You want to remember to put a screw in the clamp hole, and also to attach your 2 purlins together. Make sure you remember to put a screw through those too. So now we're just going to attach this end the same as we did on the other side. And this row of purlins will be done. Remember to point all the screws or bolts facing down. So for attaching the arches to the sidewall posts, we want to put in a Tek screw on each side, and then one from the inside of the high tunnel. We want to leave this, no screws over here. So also we want to keep these down lower toward the joint, no more than an inch up from the splice here. This way works pretty well for putting in the Tek screws. Just make sure you go either above or below so you aren't aiming at your arm. So now we're installing the 4 corner braces. So we want to make sure the 2 posts these braces are connecting are level. The top of the brace gets connected 3 inches up from the splice, and you put the bottom of the brace wherever it needs to be to hold the outside corner post level. So for these 4 corner posts, once again, we're not going to put any Tek screws where your curtain goes, and also we want to leave this open for your end wall plastic or polycarbonate. So in this case, we put 2 screws on the inside corner like this, and the Tek screw that holds this corner brace band also holds this splice.